The message came through at exactly 3:47 hours, Galactic Standard Time. It was weak, broken, and filled with static, but the words were clear enough to make every being in the Federation Communications Center stop breathing. Please, anyone. They are eating our world. We have no weapons. We have no ships. Please help us. We are dying. Ambassador stood in the center of the Great Council chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing the source of the transmission. Prime, a beautiful green world covered in forests and crystal-clear lakes, home to a peaceful species that had never known war. They were tall, thin beings with skin that glowed softly in the dark. They grew food. They made art. They sang songs that could make even the coldest heart weep. And now they were being eaten alive. The swarm had arrived 3 days ago, watched the orbital footage with sick horror. Millions of insect-like creatures covered the northern continent like a living carpet. They consumed everything: trees, animals, buildings, people. The swarm did not negotiate. They did not stop. They simply ate until nothing remained, and then they moved to the next world. "How long do they have?" asked quietly. The tactical officer, a four-armed being named Consul, checked his calculations. At current consumption rates, approximately 30 standard days, then Prime will be a dead rock. 30 days, 1 month to save an entire civilization. Turn to face the assembled representatives of the Galactic Federation. 12 species, each with their own fleets, their own armies, their own interests. She had spent 40 years building relationships with all of them. She knew exactly what each would say before they spoke. They were too far away. Their fastest ships would take 60 days to arrive. The collective had ships nearby, but their military was designed for space combat, not ground warfare against a biological swarm. They had the soldiers, but their government refused to risk them for a species that offered nothing in return. One by one, every option closed, every door shut, every hope died. Felt despair settling into her bones. She had dedicated her life to the Federation, believing that together the galaxy's species could face any threat. But here was the truth. When real danger came, everyone looked after themselves first. "There is one option." The voice came from the back of the room. Everyone turned. A young human male stood there, barely old enough to be called an adult by his species standards. His name was a junior analyst who should not have been in the council chamber at all. "Explain yourself," Consul demanded. Stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "Earth is 11 days from Prime at maximum speed. The United Earth Navy has 3 ships currently on patrol in the Outer Rim. They could reach the planet in time." The chamber fell silent, but it was not a hopeful silence. It was the silence of fear. Earth, the word hung in the air like poison. Had read the files. Every Federation member had. Earth was classified as a Class 12, the most dangerous category possible. It was a planet of extremes. Massive oceans filled with predators, continents covered in jungles, deserts, and frozen wastelands, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, hurricanes, and diseases, thousands upon thousands of microscopic killers that the humans called viruses and bacteria. The dominant species of this nightmare world was somehow even more terrifying. Humans. They were persistent predators, which meant they hunted by chasing their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Their bodies were dense with muscle and heavy bones. They breathed a toxic mix of oxygen and nitrogen that would kill most species in minutes. They healed from wounds that would be fatal to others. They consumed the flesh of dead animals and plants that had been burned with fire. And worst of all, they were violent. The humans had spent their entire history fighting each other, war after war after war. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their own cities, and then they had used those weapons on themselves. Twice. The Federation had allowed Earth to join 15 years ago, but it was a cautious relationship. Humans were kept at the edges of civilized space. Their ships were monitored. Their colonies were restricted. They were considered useful but dangerous, like a wild animal that had been partially tamed. "You want to send humans?" Consul asked, his voice rising with disbelief. "To save the swarm is terrible, but at least they only eat bodies. Humans might do far worse." "With respect," said, his jaw tight, "they have 30 days to live. Humans are the only species close enough and strong enough to help them. We can debate our fears, or we can give them a chance." Studied the young human. He was afraid, she could see that, but he was also angry. Angry that his species was spoken of like monsters. Angry that the Federation would let an entire world die rather than ask Earth for help. She made her decision. "Send the request," said. The chamber erupted in protests. Consul warned of consequences. The representative threatened to withdraw support. Others simply stared at her like she had lost her mind. Ignored them all. She watched as transmitted the message to Earth Command. A simple request, "The need help. Will you come?" They waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Began to wonder if Earth would refuse. Perhaps they were tired of being treated like dangerous animals. Perhaps they had decided that the galaxy could solve its own problems. Then the response arrived. It was short. Just 2 words sent from the United Earth ship Defiance, currently patrolling the outer rim. "We're coming." Felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope, but also fear, because she had just invited them into a rescue mission. She had no idea what would happen next. Across the galaxy, aboard the Defiance, Captain read the mission briefing. A peaceful world under attack. Millions of innocent lives at stake. A 30-day deadline before extinction. She looked at her crew. 200 humans, each one a volunteer. Engineers, medics, soldiers, scientists. All of them raised on the deadliest planet in known space. All of them trained to survive the unsurvivable. Smiled. It was not a gentle smile. "Set course for Prime," she ordered. "Maximum speed, and tell the crew to prepare for ground combat." The Defiance turned toward the stars and began to run. They were coming, and the swarm had no idea what was about to hit them. The UES Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel exactly 11 days after receiving the distress call. Captain stood on the bridge, watching Prime grow larger on the main screen. It was a beautiful world. Green continents, blue oceans, white clouds drifting peacefully across the sky. But the beauty was a lie. Could see the dark stain spreading across the northern landmass. The swarm. From orbit, it looked like a bruise on the planet's skin. Millions of creatures moving together, consuming everything in their path. "Scan complete, Captain," reported Lieutenant from her science station. "The swarm has consumed approximately 30% of the northern continent. Major population centers remain in the south, but the creatures are advancing at a rate of 50 kilometers per day." Did the math in her head. At that speed, they had maybe 3 weeks left, maybe less. "Any contact from the surface?" "Yes, Captain. A group of elders is waiting at the capital city. They are requesting immediate assistance." Nodded. "Tell them we're on our way down. Sergeant, prepare the ground teams. Full combat, we don't know what we're walking into." From across the bridge, Sergeant grinned. She was a small woman with short black hair and eyes that had seen too much death. "Already done, Captain. The troops are ready to drop." The Defiance descended through the atmosphere, its hull glowing red from the heat of entry. Below, they watched with a mixture of hope and terror. They had heard stories about humans. Everyone in the galaxy had, but none of them had ever actually met one. Elder stood at the front of the welcoming party. He was old, even by standards, with skin that glowed a soft blue in the fading light. His hands trembled slightly as he watched the human ship land. Around him, others whispered nervously. Some held their children close. Others looked like they wanted to run. The ship's ramp lowered with a hiss of steam, and then the humans emerged. Had studied images of humans before. He thought he was prepared. He was wrong. The first thing he noticed was how small they were. stood over 2 meters tall, with long limbs and delicate features. Humans were shorter, stockier, built like blocks of solid muscle wrapped in strange brown and pink skin. They moved with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, their eyes scanning everything, missing nothing. Captain walked at the front. She was shorter than most of her crew, but something about her made one step back. Maybe it was the way she carried herself. Maybe it was the weapon strapped to her hip. Maybe it was the look in her eyes, the look of a predator sizing up its territory. Elder asked. Her voice was surprisingly soft. Yes, managed. Welcome to Prime, Captain. We are grateful for your assistance. Nodded. Show me the situation, everything. I need to understand what we're fighting. For the next 2 hours, led the humans through the capital city. He showed them the refugee camps, filled with survivors from the north. He showed them the hospitals, overflowing with the wounded and dying. He showed them the communication center, where desperate messages still came in from settlements that would be overrun within days. The humans said little. They watched, they listened. They took notes on small devices attached to their arms, and their faces showed no fear, no horror, just cold, calculating focus. Lieutenant finally spoke as they stood overlooking the northern plains. In the distance, the swarm was visible as a moving darkness on the horizon. Elder, she said gently, may I explain something about humans? Nodded, though his hearts were beating fast. Smiled. It was a kind smile, but there was something behind it, something ancient and dangerous. Our world is very different from yours. On Earth, everything tries to kill you. The animals hunt you. The plants poison you. The water carries diseases. The air itself can be filled with storms that destroy cities. She paused, letting the words sink in. Humans survived all of this, not because we are stronger than other creatures, not because we are faster. We survived because we never give up. Because when something tries to kill us, we find a way to kill it first. Because we evolve to face death every single day and say no. Turn to face the distant swarm. They think they are predators. They think they are the most dangerous thing in this galaxy. They have never met humans before. Felt a chill run down his spine. But for the first time since the swarm arrived, it was not a chill of fear. It was something else, something like hope. Behind them, Sergeant was already organizing the defense. Human soldiers moved with terrifying efficiency, setting up weapon positions, establishing communication networks, building walls and barriers out of materials they had thought useless. What are they doing? Asked. Preparing, replied. The swarm will attack soon. When they do, we will be ready. How can you be so certain? Looked at him, and for a moment saw something in her eyes that he would never forget. It was not confidence. It was not bravery. It was hunger. The hunger of a species that had spent millions of years fighting to survive and had learned to love the fight. Because this is what we do, said simply. We were born on a elder. We learned to walk in a place where everything wanted us dead. The swarm is dangerous, yes, but so are we, and we have something they don't. What is that? Smiled. We choose to be here. Every human on this planet volunteered. We traveled across the galaxy to save people we have never met. The swarm fights because it is hungry. We fight because we care, and that makes all the difference. The sun set over Prime, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. In the distance, the swarm continued its advance. But in the capital city, they were preparing for war. And for the first time in weeks, they dared to believe they might survive. The attack came at dawn. Sergeant stood on the forward wall, watching the horizon through her optical scanner. The sun was just rising, casting long shadows across the empty plains. For a moment, everything was peaceful. Birds sang in the trees behind her. The wind carried the sweet smell of flowers. Then the ground began to shake. Here they come, said into her communicator. All units prepare for contact. The swarm appeared over the hills like a living wave. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. creatures the size of ground vehicles with hard shells the color of dried blood. They had 6 legs, each ending in claws sharp enough to tear through metal. Their heads were nothing but mouths, filled with rows of teeth designed for one purpose: eating. The on the wall began to panic. Some ran. Others fell to their knees, praying to gods who had not answered. They had seen what the swarm did to the northern cities. They knew what was coming. But the humans did not run. They did not pray. They simply checked their weapons one more time and waited. Private Menu stood beside, his rifle steady in his hands. He was young, barely 20 years old, with a face that still looked like a boy's, but his eyes were calm. He had trained his whole life for moments like this. "Sergeant," he said quietly, "there are a lot of them." Grinned, "Good, more targets, less chance of missing." The swarm reached the first defensive line. The humans opened fire. The sound was deafening. Explosive rounds tore into the charging creatures, blowing holes through shells and scattering pieces of chitin across the ground. Chemical grenades filled the air with burning fog that ate through organic matter. Automated turrets tracked and fired faster than any living being could react. And still the swarm came. Watched a creature take 3 direct hits and keep running. Another lost 2 legs and dragged itself forward with the remaining 4. These things did not know fear. They did not know pain. They only knew hunger. "Switch to heavy weapons," ordered. "Target the clusters." Corporal stepped forward with a shoulder-mounted launcher. She was a tall woman with burned scars on her neck from a training accident years ago. She moved without hesitation, taking aim at the densest part of the swarm. The explosion killed 50 creatures in an instant, but 500 more took their place. "They're adapting," Lieutenant reported through the communicator. "They're spreading out, reducing the effectiveness of area weapons. These things learn fast." "So do we," replied. "All units switch to targeted fire, aim for the joints, slow them down." The battle became a grind. The humans fired until their weapons overheated. They reloaded. They fired again. The swarm kept coming, climbing over the bodies of their fallen, driven by a hunger that nothing could satisfy. Then the wall broke. A section of the barrier collapsed under the weight of too many creatures. The swarm poured through like water through a crack. Civilians screamed and ran. Human soldiers rushed to fill the gap. Private Menu found himself face to face with a creature twice his size. It lunged at him, jaws opening wide enough to bite him in half. His rifle clicked empty. So he drew his knife. The creature bit down on his arm, its teeth punching through his armor. Menu felt bones crack. He felt blood pouring down his sleeve. But he did not scream. Instead, he drove his knife into the creature's eye, twisting until the blade hit brain. The creature died. Menu pulled his arm free and picked up a fallen rifle with his good hand. He kept fighting. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Corporal took an acid wound when a creature spat at her. The burning liquid ate through her armor and into her flesh. She grabbed a medical torch, burned the wound, closed herself, and returned to the line without missing a beat. A young soldier named was knocked off the wall by a charging creature. He fell 3 meters to the ground, breaking his leg. When the creature followed him down, he pulled a grenade from his belt and shoved it into the thing's mouth before rolling away. The explosion showered him with gore. He laughed. The watched all of this with something beyond fear. It was awe. These humans were getting hurt. They were bleeding. They were dying, but they refused to stop. They refused to give up. They kept fighting with a fury that seemed almost insane. Elder stood in the command center watching the battle on screens. He had seen violence before in the old stories passed down from his ancestors, but he had never seen anything like this. The humans were not just fighting. They were enjoying it. They smiled as they killed. They laughed as they bled. They shouted encouragements to each other between bursts of gunfire. "What are they?" whispered. Captain stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "We are survivors," she said simply. "On Earth, anything that could not fight died. Anything that could not endure was forgotten. We are the children of 1,000 generations of winners, elder. Our ancestors killed everything that tried to kill them. That instinct lives in our blood." The battle raged for 6 hours. When it finally ended, the plains before the capital were covered with the bodies of the swarm. Thousands of creatures lay dead, their shells cracked and broken. The humans had lost 12 soldiers. Another 30 were wounded, but the line had held. Sargent stood on the broken wall, covered in blood that was not entirely her own. She watched the surviving swarm creatures retreat toward the north, and she smiled. "Send a message to the Federation," she said. "Tell them the swarm just learned something important." "What message?" someone asked. Smile widened. "Humanity says hello." Across the city, they began to cheer. For the first time in their history, they had witnessed war, and for the first time in the swarm's history, they had been pushed back. They had done the impossible. But everyone knew this was only the beginning. The swarm would return. They always returned, and next time there would be more of them. The real war was just starting. 2 weeks passed. The swarm attacked 7 more times. Each attack was larger than the last. Each attack was smarter. The creatures learned to avoid the kill zones, to target weak points in the defenses, to sacrifice hundreds of their number to create openings for thousands more. And each time the humans held the line. But the cost was growing. Captain stood in the medical tent, looking at the rows of wounded soldiers. 43 humans had died since the mission began. Another 60 were injured too badly to fight. Her crew of 200 was now down to less than 100 combat-ready soldiers. Private Minu lay in one of the beds, his arm wrapped in bandages and supported by a metal frame. The creature's bite had shattered bones and torn muscle. The doctors said he might never use it properly again. "Captain," Minu said when he saw her approaching. He tried to salute with his good arm. "Rest, Private, that's an order." Minu smiled weakly. "Just a scratch, Captain. I'll be back on the line by tomorrow." Did not argue. She had seen soldiers with worse injuries drag themselves into battle. Humans were stubborn that way. They had to be. She moved through the tent, stopping to speak with each wounded soldier. They were all the same. Broken bones, acid burns, missing fingers, torn flesh. And all of them wanted to return to the fight. All of them asked when they could hold a weapon again. This was humanity's gift and curse. The refusal to quit. The inability to accept defeat. It had saved them 100 times throughout history. It had also killed millions who should have retreated, should have surrendered, should have lived. Outside the medical tent, the work of survival continued. Engineers repaired walls and weapons. Soldiers drilled and trained. And scattered throughout the camp, humans and worked side by side. Medic had become something of a miracle worker. She was a small woman with gentle hands and eyes that seemed to see everything. In the first days, she had focused on human patients. But as the casualties mounted, she began studying their biology, learning how to treat wounds that no human doctor had ever seen before. The breakthrough came on day 10, had a natural compound in their bioluminescent skin that promoted healing. Humans had antibodies that could fight almost any infection, found a way to combine them. "The mixture works on both species," she explained to Captain. "Regeneration with human immunity. Patients heal twice as fast and almost never get infections." It was a small discovery in the middle of a war, but it meant something larger. 2 species, completely different, finding ways to make each other stronger. Meanwhile, Lieutenant worked on a different problem. She spent her nights studying captured swarm specimens, trying to understand how they communicated. After 2 weeks of analysis, she finally found the answer. "They're not individuals," she explained to an elder. "Not really. Each creature is connected to a central mind, a queen. She controls them all, tells them where to go, what to attack, when to retreat. Kill the queen and the entire swarm loses coordination. They become animals instead of an army. Felt hope rising in his chest. Can we find her? Pulled up a holographic map. A red dot pulsed at the center of the swarm's territory, surrounded by millions of other dots representing individual creatures. She's there, about 300 kilometers north, buried under the largest concentration of swarm we've seen. Getting to her would require fighting through the entire horde. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what was saying. Reaching the queen would be suicide. Sergeant spoke first. I'll go. Me too, said Corporal. And me, added, still limping from his broken leg. One by one, every human in the room volunteered. They did not hesitate. They did not ask about survival odds or rescue plans. They simply offered their lives. Elder watched this with tears forming in his glowing eyes. He had lived for over a century. He had met hundreds of species across the galaxy. None of them were like this. None of them threw themselves toward death with such easy willingness. Why? He asked, his voice breaking. Why do you do this? You have no connection to our world. You could leave. You could save yourselves. Why do you choose to die for us? Captain looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It showed two humans, a young man and a young woman, standing together on a beach. My brother, said quietly. He died in the Pacific conflicts on Earth, a war between human nations over resources and territory. He was a medic. He ran into a burning building to save wounded soldiers. He saved 11 people before the roof collapsed. She put the photograph away. We are a violent species, Elder. We fight too much. We kill too easily, but we also protect. We save. We sacrifice. It is the same instinct pointed in different directions. My brother died protecting strangers. I would be honored to do the same. Understood then. Humans were not monsters. They were something far more complicated. They were creatures of extremes, capable of terrible destruction and incredible love. And they had chosen to point their violence outward, toward the swarm, in defense of a world they had never seen before. We will help, said. Whatever you need, we'll fight beside you. Smiled, then let's plan a hunt. That night, the humans worked together to design the mission. It would require the Defiance to provide orbital support. It would require a ground team small enough to move fast but strong enough to fight through anything. And it would require someone willing to carry a bomb into the heart of the swarm and not come back. Everyone knew the odds. Everyone volunteered anyway. This was humanity's answer to despair. Not acceptance, not surrender, just another fight, another chance to matter. And if they died, at least they would die saving something worth saving. The strike team departed at midnight. 12 volunteers. Captain insisted on leading them herself. Sergeant walked beside her, carrying enough explosives to level a small city. Behind them came the others. Minyu, who had torn off his bandages and demanded to join despite his ruined arm. Young soldiers and old warriors, all walking toward almost certain death. Elder watched them go. He had tried to thank them, to say something meaningful, but the words had caught in his throat. What did you say to people who were about to die for your world? Captain had made it easy. She had simply clasped his arm in the human way and smiled. Remember us, she said. That's all we ask. Then she was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Above, the UES Defiance prepared for its role. Lieutenant had taken command in his absence. She coordinated with the ship's weapons officers, plotting the bombardment pattern that would create a corridor through the swarm. At exactly 100 hours, the sky lit up with fire. Orbital strikes rained down on the swarm's territory, burning paths through the living carpet of creatures. The explosions were visible from the capital city, turning night into day for brief, terrible seconds. The ground team moved through the gaps, running as fast as they could before the swarm could close in behind them. The first hour went well. The team covered 50 kilometers, dodging patrols and moving through terrain the bombardment had cleared. Then the swarm adapted. They stopped trying to close the gaps. Instead, they collapsed inward, surrounding the human team from all sides. The corridor disappeared. The team was alone, deep in enemy territory, with 300 kilometers still to go. "Well," Sergeant said, checking her weapon, "I was getting bored anyway." They fought through the night. Every kilometer cost them. Private fell first, overwhelmed by a swarm of smaller creatures that crawled through his armor. He killed a dozen of them before they brought him down. Corporal went next, holding us so the others could escape. Her last words were a curse aimed at the creatures tearing into her. By dawn, only 6 remained. Was wounded, her leg bleeding from a deep gash. Minyu's broken arm had reopened, leaving a trail of blood behind him, but they kept moving. They had no other choice. The Queen's nest came into view as the sun rose. It was a mountain of organic material, pulsing with the rhythm of a massive heartbeat. Creatures swarmed around it like blood cells around a wound. The team stopped at the edge of a ridge, looking down at their target. "There she is," said quietly, "big girl." The Queen was visible through gaps in the nest's walls. She was enormous, the size of a building, her bloated body producing eggs that workers carried away by the thousands. She was the brain of the swarm. Kill her, and the nightmare would end. Between them and the Queen stood approximately 50,000 swarm creatures. "Made the call. We go in together as far as we can. When we can't go further, someone takes the bomb and finishes the job. Volunteer basis. Who wants it?" Every hand went up. Nodded, she had expected nothing less. "Has the most experience with explosives. She carries it. The rest of us clear the path. Understood." They understood. They said their goodbyes quickly, without tears, without drama. A clasp of hands, a nod of respect. Words saved for later if there was a later. Then they charged. The battle was chaos. The humans moved through the swarm like fire through dry grass, weapons blazing, blades cutting, bodies pushing forward no matter the cost. Minyu fell at the outer wall, taking a blow meant for. He died with a smile on his face and a knife in a creature's throat. Went down inside the nest itself, his leg finally giving out. He stayed behind to hold a tunnel while the others pressed on. His grenades kept exploding for a full minute after he stopped moving. Then it was just 3 of them, and a young private named. They burst into the Queen's chamber, surrounded by horror, with nowhere left to run. The Queen saw them. Her vast intelligence focused on these tiny invaders who had dared enter her domain. Around her, thousands of creatures turned to face the threat. "Get clear," said. "No," replied, "we finish this together." Shook her head. She was already arming the explosive. "Captain, someone has to tell the story. Someone has to explain what happened here. Go home." A creature lunged at them, intercepted it, grappling with the thing even as it bit into her shoulder. She screamed but did not let go. Tried to move forward, but her wounded leg buckled. She fell hard, tasting blood. When she looked up, was already walking toward the Queen, bomb in hand, firing at anything that got close. "For Earth," shouted over the noise. For everyone these things ever took." She reached the Queen. The massive creature tried to move to escape, but it was too slow. Climbed onto its back, found the softest spot between its armored plates, and shoved the explosive deep inside. She looked back at one last time. She was still smiling. The explosion destroyed the Queen's chamber. The shockwave knocked unconscious. When she woke, she was being dragged through tunnels by who had somehow survived and was bleeding from a dozen wounds. Behind them, the swarm was falling apart. Without the Queen's guidance, the creatures lost all coordination. They attacked each other, wandered aimlessly, collapsed into mindless animals. The nightmare was ending. Rescue shuttles found them 3 hours later. Of the 12 who had entered swarm territory, only 2 walked out, but those 2 had saved a world. 3 weeks later, Captain stood before the Galactic Federation Council. She was still limping. She would probably limp for the rest of her life. She did not care. Elder spoke first. He told the assembled representatives everything he had witnessed: the violence and the compassion, the terror and the sacrifice, the humans who had crossed the galaxy to die for strangers. "You call their world," said, his voice strong despite his age. "You fear them as monsters, but I have seen what they truly are: protectors, guardians, the kind of beings who run toward danger so others can run away." He paused, letting the words settle. The SOS was clear: help us, and Earth sent its finest. They did not ask for payment. They did not demand gratitude. They simply came because we needed them. 43 humans died saving my world. Remember their names, honor their sacrifice, and never call them monsters again. The council voted that day. Earth was reclassified, no longer now a guardian world, the first of its kind. And across the galaxy, species who had once feared humanity began to hope, because now they knew the truth. When the darkness came, when all seemed lost, when the SOS went out and no one else answered, Earth would come. They would become guardians. And they would never stop fighting for those who could not fight for themselves.